Chairman Jacobs, it's you.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. We need to call a roll, Heidi, right?
Yes, sir.
You're ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Trustee Baker.
Present.
Trustee Boyd.
Present.
Trustee DeLay.
Here.
Trustee Freeman.
Here.
Trustee Jacobs.
Here.
Trustee Martin. Here. Chairman Smith.
Yes.
Trustee McDonald.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. You did put me down present for the previous meeting.
I'm sorry?
You did put me down as present for
I
the
noted
previous
when
meeting.
Yes, sir.
I think I did make more than 50% of it because it ran so long.
So noted.
But that's okay. Once again, Alan Thomas and his team have done a great job. It's difficult during this time of uncertainty, and they keep doing a fantastic job. And I want to thank him before he gets into the meat of the agenda today. We have two action items. First will be the approval of the minutes, and then after that, we'll have Alan pick up where we have to revise the the budget for 2020-21, and I'll let Alan pick up there, and we do have to approve that. And then he will go over the capital outlay, maintenance recommendations, operating recommendations, and then we have a special guest. He's always here, always looking for money. We actually put him on the agenda this time to tell us how the foundation is doing, and then we'll entertain any comments and then close there. First item of business is the minutes. They're in your book. They were sent out earlier. I would entertain a motion to...
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much there. Alan, you can be making... Alan is here in the house. Alan, if you'll walk them through the revised budget for 2021.
Yes, thank you.
Tab 2.
Tab 2. Thank you for your comments, and always glad to put this together for your review. This is a little different this year with the way the original state budget was passed and when we did the July budget. If you recall, we did that early on. It was in April, 1st of May, and at that time we were working from the limited budget that was passed by the General Assembly in March. So fast forward to now, that budget was amended in June. If you recall, the all higher ed funding, new funding, was removed from that budget. Most capital outlay was removed from that budget, along with capital maintenance and some special initiatives. So if you start on page 9, and I won't walk through each one of these, but you will see, unfortunately, on the revenue side, negatives where we are taking out state appropriations. That's the salary funding that was in during March, 1% by the state. Along with just general operations. If you go down to sales and services of other activities, that mostly reflects, or a big majority of that reflects, adjustments that's been made in the athletic revenues, things that we know now with ticket sales and other revenue sources such as game guarantees. Still some unknowns there, so of course we revised this budget again in the spring. If you flip over to page 10 and 11, both of those are expense tables, and those have been adjusted. In this budget, we re-budget year-end numbers into expense. So anything that we had at year-end balances, they get re-budgeted as an expense. And when we submit a budget to the state, that does not fall out into fund balance. We show a break-even standpoint. Most of that we rebudget is in course fee revenue. We try to maintain a 1-year revenue in those course fee revenue accounts. So come July 1, we can start spending that money, and we're not spending money that we haven't collected yet for the upcoming year. The next largest one is the research program, and that's mostly indirect cost recoveries that go into there that go back in to assisting and obtaining new grants, new federal grants, state grants, and contracts. And then lastly on that page will be the scholarships and fellowships. That's a new additional funding that goes in there. As you know, 2 years ago we started increasing our scholarship levels. So that's additional resources that go into there. On page 11, the only item I'll mention there is the salaries. As I said earlier, we pulled the 1% salary out of that number, so that's why that went down. There were some position reductions there as well. So on page 12, that's our auxiliary units. The largest one there will be our housing auxiliaries. And as you've heard this morning already, single occupancy in the fall, single occupancy in the spring. So the housing ended the 2021 year, a good year where they were able to add to their reserves. So this funding, this loss of funding here, they will have to dip into those reserves, net of reducing expenses in those in some categories, and the other auxiliary units are doing the same. So on the restricted tab, not much movement there, about 2.7 million out of almost 100 million. We did some reclassification in CARES Act funding down in the expense section, but that was merely a reclassification. Page 14 is just a summary of all the revenue for the university, and as you see, you'll see the adjustments that were made on the previous pages. And then page 15 is just a list of disclosed projects that we've indicated that we would need to at least partially be financed by School Bond Authority. Those are just rollover projects that are still out there. We're in the process of starting the one for the School of Concrete and Construction Management. That one has been approved. We did that a couple of weeks ago, so that line of credit is available to the university for that project. A couple of things that are not in here that I did want to also give you an update on, and I mentioned, that we've had lost revenues and we've had additional COVID-19 expenses since March, so it's covered 2 fiscal years of almost $20 million. A big chunk of that is in the housing, with reduced occupancy, in athletics for the reduced ticket sales, the online fee that we're not charging students for this year. Several things there that have attributed to that. So all of that has been reflected in here. Like I said, some of it was last year, some of it was this year, so it's not all in one fiscal year. An update on the CARES Act funding. This number has not changed. We have been awarded a little bit over 19.7 million. That number hasn't changed since the last report, but we have spent 17.4 million of that funding. And so we have a balance of about 2.3 million, where most of that is being reserved in case we need it for more COVID-related expenses. If not, We can redirect some of that to some of the cleaning standards. They have allowed us now to go back, and if you increase your cleaning standards and can demonstrate that, you can go back and recapture and charge those expenses to the CARES Act. Also, we could do some more technology projects as well, and there's a few other items that the US DOE has now said you can use that CARES Act funding for these items. So we would go back and evaluate that and make sure we spend every penny by middle of May 21. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. I'll entertain any questions.
Yes, any questions for Alan?
I have a question, if you don't mind. You mentioned in your ending statements that the lost revenues and expenses due to COVID across 2 years totaled $20 million.
Yes.
How is that going? To what category would you say the most of that loss or change would occur as, and how are we going to work that through the system?
A large portion of that has hit our auxiliaries. Housing being the most, but it's hit the other ones as well, and items that are not auxiliaries but do have reserve accounts like the online fee, distance education. So right now we're tracking to reduce expenses in those areas, and then what we need we can pull out of their reserve account. Like I said, last year the auxiliaries ended the year very good. Didn't spend a whole lot from the March through June on additional expenses and stuff like that. So they were able to put that in reserve knowing this year might be different, may be looking different. So those resources are there and we'll reflect them like that. The ones in unrestricted that are out in the departments, a lot of departments took on their own initiatives and covered those expenses out of their departmental budgets. But like I said, the auxiliaries are the ones, but they've had reserves built over many, many years to tap into. So.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is not exactly the most popular subject to bring up. I know we've got to be aware of what the governor has asked for from each head of each commission and cabinet, a 12% across the board budget reduction. And those hearings are currently started yesterday underway. And they are very serious and very real. They completed 6 yesterday. As you know, Haslam always asked for 2%. Bredelson asked for 9%. There is some reality in COVID effect at the state level in their revenue, according to FNA, directly from FNA, that they have to be prepared for. So in a broad-based statement, it's a tough position to be sitting here talking about it, but there is a possible reality of business life of some appropriations being cut coming our way. I think that's realistic, and that's a statement, nothing else. So your job's already tough, but that may present a toughness as well, looking down.
Trustee Baker, let me comment that I'm glad you raised that issue, and it is one that we are very much aware of and concerned. The last 3 weeks, I have held virtual town hall meeting with every single employee at the university. The first week with each college separately, and last week all of the administrative division. And that is one of the points I told the employees that we need to be aware of. This past budget year, the 12%, we were successful, we meaning the LGI presidents and the UT presidents, of getting Governor Lee to hold us harmless during this current year. Is that right, Alan?
Yes.
But I did tell them, as a result of COVID and the economic challenges that the state is experiencing, we need to be prepared to deal with other challenges in the budget that might call for significant reduction in our budget. And we have done some scenario planning at the executive leadership area in case we have to move in that direction. But I'm so pleased that you brought it up because it's something that I have been trying to get our employees to know and understand and realize that there might be some further belt tightening going on.
I don't know the actual in and outs of it, but the state is leading the way. They have eliminated 850 positions. Now, them 850 positions might have been ghost positions or whatever they were, but they're leading the way to these commissioners saying, okay, what do you got? And so far it's been 850 positions eliminated.
And that's because the governor did not hold them harmless this year. That was just for this current year.
Right.
And actually today, as we speak, the higher education budget session is going on. And Alan will tell you that we have submitted to Brian Nolan, who's representing the LGIs, our concern, and hopefully we hope we can get the governor in case there's another significant reduction to try to hold. Because keep in mind, every time we had a recession, who got hit? Higher education, higher education. So I give a lot of compliments to Governor Lee and the Commissioner of Finance, who actually agreed with us that it was time that they give us some slack during this downturn in the economy.
And also in our discussions with THEC and their finance folks and the materials for their THEC meetings, and so they have only put in a 2% reduction analysis. Now that's what they've indicated they've been asked for. Now that doesn't mean that today, that it's different. But that's pretty normal to what they've asked for in the past. Now, last year, they exempted us even from that in the very beginning when they were doing the pre-COVID budget. They didn't do any percent reduction, but this year they went back to a 2%. What does a 2% reduction look like for higher education? So,
and just a postscript, I need to compliment the board again for the decision not to increase tuition and fees this year. When THEC actually was meeting with the Commissioner of Education, Alan will know that they called me because I had alerted them that I was going to recommend to our board 0 increase in tuition fees. And Director Krause called and said he was meeting with the commissioner and they were discussing that 12%, and he wanted to know whether or not, if they hold us harmless, whether or not this board will accept my recommendation of a 0 increase. And I said, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons he tells us that the commissioner and the governor held us harmless.
And you were talking about position cuts as well. We have made some already in this budget. If you recall, we had to cut $6.9 million to balance this year's budget. So I think we've cut a little bit over 30 positions from that. They were not filled positions. They were unfilled positions, but every division had to look and analyze and make those cuts.
Any other questions, comments?
On a somewhat maybe optimistic note, I did read an interesting article that said Tennessee was coming out better as a state than states that live off of income tax. Mm-hmm. Because income tax, when you have a large homeless hit or workless hit, unemployment hit, the income tax rate goes down. But there's a base on spending that continues to support the economy on a sales tax.
Sure. Hearing no more questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2021.
Motion made.
Second.
Delay.
Good. Any more questions, changes, suggestions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Alan?
Okay, I'm going to defer on this one to Bill Waits, our Assistant Vice President for Campus Planning, to give you some good news. Mm-hmm.
morning.
Morning.
Morning. I have one item for you all today, and that is to give you an update on our capital outlay and capital maintenance request. This is just an information item only. For reference, tab 3 in your materials on page 17 is where this starts. On the capital outlay side, on June 2nd of this year, just to recap, the MTSU Board of Trustees approved the Applied Engineering Building for our FY 21-22 outlay project. This is a $55 million project that will provide a new center for MTSU's expanding engineering technology programs. The MTSU request was made to THEC in late July for review and priority ranking and subsequent funding recommendations to Governor Bill Lee for inclusion in the state budget. In the fall 2020 Commission meeting, THEC presented their capital outlay recommendations for capital outlay funding. These recommendations are on page 19 in your materials there. And I'm happy to report that we were ranked number 3. And I do want to point out that on this list, the first 2 projects, the Tennessee Tech University Engineering Building and the Austin Peay Health Professions Building, were slated for funding in the previous year and had to be removed from the budget due to the COVID pandemic. So kind of the way we see it is we ranked as high as we could in this request. So we're all very pleased and happy with that ranking. And so we're very pleased. We're able to fine-tune our submittal from last year, and I think the results were shown in that ranking. On the capital maintenance funding side, just to recap, on June 2nd of this year, the board approved 10 capital maintenance projects that were presented by Joe Whitefield for 21-22 capital budget inclusion. The capital maintenance request was made to THEC along with the capital outlay funding for their review and priority ranking. This request totaled is just shy of $10 million, and of course these will be to maintain current facilities and provide needed improvements to campus infrastructure and utilities. As you can see on page 21, all 10 of those requested capital maintenance projects are listed on THEC's recommendations in their priority order. And if we look at past years, certainly we will probably end up with half, about 50%, depending on the budget of those projects being funded. And that's really, I know it was a short presentation, but I just want to give you a quick update on that. Certainly any questions that you have, I'll be glad to answer.
Congratulations on your ranking.
Thank you, and certainly it was a group effort. You know, we have people from the provost office certainly that are critical in that, as well as the academic, Dean Fisher and Dr. Bedecker and John Rozelle from the academic units. And I do have to say that in these circumstances, it was much more difficult. Usually we love to get around a small table and work. So we didn't have that opportunity this year, but I think we did very well considering the circumstances, and we're able to, like I said, to refine it and really improve our previous submittal. So we're very pleased with that.
Yeah, Chairman Jacobs, I'll add to that. Bill, you went over very quickly about the third, but the THEC folks called and said you all will rank of the new rankings. This include all of the public institutions in the state. And these rankings of these capital projects are done by outside architects and professionals. It's a blind ranking. We will rank number 1 for the new year, this coming year, with our applied engineering building and the fund support mechatronics and other programs. And that really is critical when you think about what the last 3 or 4 years, the rankings and the facilities that we were. So again, good job to you and your staff and faculty that put that project together.
Thank you, Bill.
Do you have any expectation or idea or hint about how far into the capital projects list the funding will go, or is that completely up to air?
Certainly there's a lot to be seen on it. I know I asked, I try to get as much information regarding that as we can. I do know that at number 3, I think there's, I'm not going to say a high likelihood, because I think there's still certainly a lot to be seen with the budget and certainly the hits that it's taken. But I think we're in a good position to potentially get funded. I know there's some potential to do geo bonding, maybe to fund the project, and some other avenues that the state may consider to do it. So Certainly, I don't know, and my crystal ball's as cloudy as everyone else's.
Foggy
So,
like my glasses.
I will tell you, Trustee Martin, I heard directly from the executive director of THEC when he informed me, and he said it's highly, highly likely. And again, that's because of the bond financing and the fact that it is ranked number one. No guarantees, but he was very optimistic that that project will be sent forward and be funded.
Thank you, Bill.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tab 4 regarding the THEC operating recommendations. I'm working Pat overtime. She's cleaning, and I'm asking her to pass out something that is not in the materials related. It's a one-page document that goes along with this. And every year, THEC has its fall meeting, and as many of you know, they had this year's fall meeting here last week. So they make two recommendations. They make an operating appropriation recommendation based on the formula and new higher education funding. And then they also do set a tuition guidance range. So they did both of those last week. If you'll turn to page 27, and you'll see MTSU in the middle of the first section up there. And if you'll go to those two columns in the middle, this in next year's funding formula, we will lose $2.2 million just in the funding formula itself. That's the redistribution of no new funding. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. Now, they are recommending to the governor for $36 million of new higher education funding. And that's that second column, or column D. That would provide us $3.2 million. And then if you look at column E, we would net just under $1 million in new additional funding. I was hoping to get some additional information for the meeting on exactly what we've been able to obtain from THEC in years past. That kind of looks at all the 9 or 10 metrics, and we kind of see where we gained and where we lost some ground. But I've had those discussions with them this week and last week to get the information. We don't have the chart exactly, but it looks like it's in our degree area, bachelor's, in all three, the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral. And if you'll notice on what was just passed out, MTSU continues to be, especially among the LGIs, the top producer of bachelor's degrees. That has continued for the 5 years that's shown there, and even before then. So a small drop from one year to the next on that one is very minimum. But you also look to the right, and here's where we had the discussion earlier this morning about the focus populations. There's two: the adult, if you're classified as an adult, or low income. And if you look at the far right column, in one focus, that first column, if you're in one focus population, you're either adult or low income, we have 1,717. If you scan the page, that's the largest, not just among LGIs, but including UT. The same thing for both focus, if a student is in both focus populations. And if you scan through here, most institutions are going down in those categories or have gone down in those categories. But if you look at our numbers, and you have to remember the formula is a 3-year average. So it doesn't help a lot to look at last year and compare that to this year. You have to look at 3 years back.
And what page you on?
The handout that Pat
she just handed-
provided. Yes,
Oh.
sorry. Yes. So if you look in those far two right columns, in the one focus population, we're dropping off 2016-17 year. We had 1,821 students that was classified as in one of those focus populations. We're adding on 1,717. If they're in both populations, we're dropping off 1,055, adding on 870. So those are the numbers that we're getting. A student is counted as 1.8 instead of 1, or 2 instead of 1. So when you lose numbers in those categories, then it goes back to your bachelor's degrees, and even those didn't adjust a lot, these numbers did, and I think is where it's reflected in the formula as well.
So, Alan, when you say like low income bachelor 2194, and you say we get 1.8 for that, what are you meaning?
The student is counted in the formula when they run the formula. That student is counted as 1.8 instead of 1, a factor of 1.
So we get what? We get 1.8. We get more value,
right,
for
as
getting them through the process because
yes,
the difficulty
yes,
of where they're from, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, and that was added to the formula. It was added to the formula when the new formula was first developed 10 years ago. But the first 5 years they only gave you 0.4 addition, and if you were in both of them, they gave you another 0.4, so you could only get up to 1.8. In 2015, they changed that to one focus population 1.8, and then you got up to 2.0 if you were in both. And that's to recognize the additional resources you need to get those students a degree and graduated. So is it enough? You put a lot of wraparound resources of those students, but is that enough? And that's been one of the discussions that we've had with TEC.
So is there a math formula for that? Is there how we can determine whether or not if what they're giving us is enough? There's got to be some math behind it
right.
somehow.
Yeah. I think that's something we would have to look at all the programs that we heard about this morning, that we're doing, and see, what is that totaling, and trying to decide how many students did we get through on that, how much did it cost us per student to come up with, and I think that would be possible, yes.
This is really an important point in an area. I think last year I met with each board member individually, and we went over this in terms of we have pointed out from day one the concerns that we have with the quirkiness of this formula that really kind of disadvantage us for being successful. If you look at the numbers, what we are producing, the number of students in each of these categories is so significantly high. So we drop a few, and then the institutions that are so low, they gain just a few, they end up getting the money. And we end up getting penalized. And if you all recall, during the first board meeting, Executive Director Krause came, and he actually acknowledged that this was a problem in the formula for us. And they were scheduled to conduct a review of the formula this spring that will give us an opportunity to provide input and make some suggestion about how this can be more equitable. But because of the virus, they have canceled that meeting, and I think it's scheduled for sometime next year.
Yes.
We have some specific suggestions about how this formula could be much more equitable for institutions like MTSU that is performing at a high level. The numbers really jump out at you when you look at what we're producing, both at the bachelor's degree level and all of those focus degree level, compared with our other institution. And Trustee Boyd, the point you made earlier about the percentage of degree that we are producing compared to others, it connects to this.
Well, Alan and I talked about this a couple of days ago, and it's interesting. We won't go into a whole lot of detail, but it's interesting, I think, that UT Knoxville gets hit 521,000. We get hit 2.2 million. But our graduation percentage of total bachelor's degrees in those two focused populations group is 64%. UT Knoxville's is 37%. 50% of our, a little over 50% of ours. So, something isn't right with this formula. And there's other statistics I looked at with Alan on here. So I think we can point. There's data to back up what you're saying that we can point out to TEC.
And you pointed out also that even if you do that same comparison to the total, which is 57%, we're above even that.
Yeah.
So.
And we're just not bringing this issue up. When the formula was established and they told us, we actually objected. But of course, we were part of the Board of Regents system then, and the system took a position that they were not going to object to it. But it's time now for us to really be pretty aggressive and bringing this to the attention.
The only university really that significantly outperforms us is Austin Peay, and I suspect that's due to their Fort Campbell connection. Gives them some.
Yeah, there was some major discussion at the TEC meeting on Friday regarding that, and their awarding of associate
degrees, which
and related to Fort Campbell, and those associate degrees currently count just as much as a bachelor's degree in here. So that will definitely be in the next review of the formula. So
we've been in discussions. Dr. McPhee and I have 2 or 3 times a week, seems like, since COVID started. And I ask him, and he is and has, that we come up with specific solutions to the formula. I don't want to be like Republicans where we're great at what we're against and don't know what we're for. So it's easy to say bad things about it, but if I think we'll successfully be able to influence positive changes if we have the data that Tom's talking about behind it. And this time we do. So I'm hopeful on that, half full, like Tom says. I'm hopeful that with specific suggestions, we can carry water on that.
that's it.
You're about to run out of time, Mr. Chairman.
No, Joe, we only got one more, and I know Joe does not like a lot of scrutiny, so this.
We got JB now.
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief, I promise. Just a few highlights to give you just a little background. I mean, obviously, with what's going on with COVID, with a presidential race, with what's been happening all around the country, with a couple of natural disasters and hurricanes, philanthropy has had a very tough year. I don't think there's been any doubt about that all over the country. That most of our peers are seeing a lot of variation in what's going on. We're very pleased that our numbers don't reflect that. If you look at our 5-year giving totals, you see we've stayed relatively stable, and in fact, we were up last fiscal year by a little over 5%, which was almost unheard of. Most schools weren't. A lot of that was due to the fact we had a really good first 6 months because, frankly, from March to July until July the 1st, we kind of dried up. Like a lot of people. But with that kind of carried us. We have carried that forward into the current year, though, where we've picked back up in the fall. And as of this morning, we're up almost $500,000 over same day last year. So we feel like we've got things going in a relatively strong direction. We feel good about that. The things that we are starting to see, though, is a real influence on donor numbers, particularly our annual giving numbers. We're seeing a big decline in donors under $1,000. I mean, that's the population right now that's been hurt in a lot of ways, whether that's being laid off, the fear of being laid off, the things that are happening. And so those numbers are starting to reflect in our donor numbers. But larger projects, major gifts have really kind of carried us through. We feel like we're in a good position. There's 2 or 3 things that we're working on, the new engineering building and a couple other projects that we think will drive some additional gifts for the current year. So we feel like we have a chance to stay fairly stable. But you can look across through there and you can see that those numbers kind of reflect that. The thing I would call your attention to on that first sheet on page 33 is right about 2/3 of the way down. There's a line that's yellow with a yellow highlight stripe through it. And we follow the model that almost everybody in America follows. And if you look at that, you can see how much we've received in total gifts and how much the top 10% of our donor numbers represent. We're at about 92% of our dollars every year come from 10% of our donors. And that's reality. That's what happens. Some of you may remember years ago they talk about 80-20 and all of those things, or 90-10. What they'll tell you now, it's really 95% of the money comes from about 5% of your donors, and 10 gifts make the difference. And if you look at our top 10, you kind of see our top 10 is almost half. So that's the trend line that I think is going to continue. That's we're going to see drive fundraising, and that's what really influences the direction we go with our people. Second thing you'll see on page 36, it just gives you a little bit of a breakdown as where the money goes as far as our units. We're relatively pleased with most of our unit performances. We're starting to see most of our colleges get to a point where they are at or above their peer levels, and that's where we're really striving for. Those numbers are there. If you want greater detail, I can give it to you. But we feel like our academic programs right now, the programs we have in place, are starting to generate the revenue that they need to sustain their enterprise. On page 35, you've got a very quick summary of our foundation endowment performance. I would tell you June 30th, we were not overwhelmingly happy with where we were. You can look at it and kind of see. 1.5% for the year we did not think was where we wanted to be. That kind of put us in sort of the middle of the country among our peers. Interestingly, yesterday afternoon late we got the NACUBO report, and surprisingly our numbers were almost exactly on national averages. We really thought we were further behind than we were, and our numbers all across the board hit dead on with our peers all across the country. So didn't worry quite so much about that. The next sheet, though, if you flip over, is the one that's really, if you go to the September 30th number, which that kind of reflects what's happening with our foundation management. We do really well in tough environments. We don't do particularly well in good environments. So for the last quarter, we did 7.7%, which nationally put us in the top 5% of all foundations and endowments in reporting. And if you looked at the year to date at 7.3, that kept us in the top 5. So all across the board, just in 3 months, our performance went from middle of the road to top 25%. And we just finished an endowment evaluation, manager evaluation, and that was one of the things that they reported. Said one of the challenges with doing it is point in time. Where you were June 30th, we would have told you was average. If you'd given us these numbers to work off of, we'd have said you've done pretty darn well. But we feel like we have kept that moving in a very strong direction. And so the foundation, I think, has properly managed their funds and provided an adequate resource for the campus to operate on. The only last thing I'll hit very briefly is I know you're always interested in what we're doing with the monies that you all provide in the trustees fund, as well as other activities that we've got to support some of our students in need. Trustees fund is actually one of 5 funds that we have set up that help students. Some are targeted for things like our homeless student population, our food bank, and then 3 other, the trustees fund and 2 others that help students in need. Right now we generate collectively about $100,000 a year between those 5 funds that we can utilize through student affairs to identify and assist those students who have greater need. We're really pleased that with Dr. McPhee's help and some hard work from with Deb Sells' folks putting something together, Truist Foundation is going to add $40,000 to that this year. So we feel like going in to January, we're going to be in a pretty good place to address those students who have hardships, particularly those that have been influenced by COVID-19. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop and answer any questions anybody might have.
Mr. Bales?
Yes, sir.
In the fact that your donor-based $1,000 gifts and blows fading, that takes us to the upper level, being estates and gifts and the new tax capital gains opportunity.
Yes, sir.
What type of marketing and periodicals have you got planned to go out, and how quick are they going out?
Well, a lot. We're just, in fact, we just signed a new contract with a company to help us that'll do some more estate planning, because for many years there wasn't any estate planning done here on this campus. We do it now. We've used a couple of providers that we've been relatively pleased with. As a result, in fact, you can look at the bottom of our pages. We've put together in the last 5 years about $37 million in expectancies. We average about $2.5–3 million. A lot of it, though, is much more responding to an inquiry. You don't get a lot of true estate gifts just by sending somebody a piece of mail. You'll get a response, and almost all of our annual appeals have some reference. If you'd like information, reach out, and that requires follow-up. But you bring up an interesting point. One of the reasons our annual fund will be down, last year we did 53 individual solicitations. Now, we don't solicit all of our alums 53 times, but depending on what your interest is, where your college is, what you've demonstrated your gifts for, they are very, very targeted, so that we reach out and ask our alums to give to something that's specific to them. A lot of those, because of COVID and because of the way we're operating campus now, have been impacted. For example, we use student callers. That doesn't happen now. We can't get students in a room. Can't put them in there. We were 3 months with our printing services basically inoperational. We couldn't print materials. We had to do a lot with the internet and have to do a lot of what we're doing with text to give, with all of those remote access. For our population, that's a learning curve. They're still not comfortable with giving online in a lot of cases, but we do our True Blue Give, which really gets us a great outreach. But we've had to adjust. But to your question, we're doing as much as we can. It is somewhat limited, but we think the new company we've brought on board, and we'll start with them, and after the first of the year, that's going to drive some additional revenue. That's the good side. The downside, from the day a planned gift is created and written, it's about 18 years before you actually realize that. So, but we've fortunately, we start to see, we're going to see, as many of you know, next year or so, we're going to see a couple of big planned gifts come to fruition that we'll receive that will certainly help, no doubt about that.
Joe, do you have a person that's in charge of digital, or if you're 100 years old, you'd say internet? Do you have a digital
yes,
person?
We have the young lady that handles our annual funds. So much of that is done electronically. So she does our web pages, she does our digital outreach, she does all of our email. One of the things the campus has done, we've gotten a new email package system that lets us do a lot better job. In the past, our system was very rudimentary. You got a very plain text email that asks you to give. Now we can incorporate pictures, we can embed video, we can do things that will make that a whole lot more attractive and a lot more interesting to our donor base. But yes, we got somebody assigned to that.
Well, fundraising on the political side has drastically shifted from one-on-one calls to small donations. And over the next year or two, I would hope you'd look at perhaps getting advice from Democrats, Republicans, both have good ones. But how the political people do it generates bazillions of dollars, and I would think there would be some interaction on how they do it versus how we do it.
And
So I'm going to recommend you.
sure.
And if you'd like, several of us in here can give you names of people that make a living nothing but digitally raising bazillions of dollars.
And I would say, Mr. Chairman, out of the 53 solicitations we did last year, probably half were digital. So we have been heavily involved in that space, but we certainly, any new ideas, companies that might have a creative solution that we haven't looked at, we'd be more than interested in.
Well, it would increase your below $1,000 gifts. Above $1,000 gifts, I don't have that chart in front of me, but digitally on a campaign, unless it's a personal solicited and they gave you a credit card, digitally on a campaign, the numbers many times hardly match the expense. But it still gives you, if you break even on those, the outreach is worth it. I'll take that on myself to bug you.
Sure, and you might find it interesting. Dr. McPhee will recall in the previous election, we got looking at that very same thing. And one of the issues with digital, and I won't mention which party, but one party did a very good job, but they had an email list of 65 million people. Their response rate was 0.002%. But with 65 million people, that was a substantial population. Their average gift, to your point, was $300 and something, and that represented millions of dollars.
How many are in our email base?
In our email base, we have about 121,000 emails. Now, of that 121,000, about 50% are under the age of 40.
Well, obviously, the first step is mining emails.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And I don't know how we do that, and I'm sure it's well done, but we need to mine all the emails we can so we can get them for $5 a piece. So,
sure, exactly.
Anyway.
Other questions?
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Good report. Any other business for the Finance and Personnel Committee?
Mr. Chairman, not any no business, but as you all know, that this meetings are streamed, and we have faculty and staff and students watching. I have been very much insisting on our policy and requirement that masks be worn in all of our buildings. And I think as leaders, I get nervous about when I walk out of my office. I try to keep a mask in my pocket because the last thing I want is for one of the employees to come up to me and say, "You've been beating us over the head with wearing your mask in the building. You're not." So I would encourage us as we meet and when we are not speaking to wear a mask so that I don't get hassled legitimately by some of our employees and our students. That is just a friendly reminder. Thank you.
Move to adjourn.